But we began with a few women. The first year was very tough, 250 women in a sea of men. But every year we doubled that number, and we began gradually to see that they were, first of all, great students. Two, they put up with the nonsense of the initial years with very few women. And before long, we had about 49% women, which is half the student body. Their effect, I think, has been monumental. This was their hall, this was their home, and they had enormous friendships grew up. I noticed later on when the 25-year classes of women and men would gather, the women always had their own group that they'd grown up with in the hall, which they kept in touch with, were at each other's marriages, they discussed each other's children, and it became a wonderful bond. And I think recently, it was last year, I went to Chicago and talked to an exclusively women's graduate group, 350 of them. We had a wonderful lunch and wonderful conversation, a few nice talks, and I was convinced that we did the right thing.
Please welcome Lisa Herb from the class of 1988 and a former resident of both Lewis and Walsh Halls. Lisa was a government and international studies major and came to Notre Dame from Edmunds, Washington. She currently resides in Seattle and is the executive director of the Alliance for International Women's Rights and a practicing attorney in the area of commercial litigation.
Thank you. I'm really happy to be here today. So I've been asked to talk about the organization I founded, the Alliance for International Women's Rights, and about how my time at Notre Dame was part of the path to founding the Alliance. Before I talk about the path, I'd like to tell you a little bit about the Alliance and what we do. There should be a picture. There we go. So the Alliance's story actually begins in Mongolia, where I was living in 2003 and 2004 due to my husband's work as a wildlife biologist. I was still working long distance for a Seattle law firm, but I had extra time on my hands, and I'm not great with having extra time on my hands. So I volunteered with 2 women's rights organizations as well as an orphanage, primarily helping them communicate and work with international organizations. When I returned to the States, they asked if I could continue helping them long distance. And they also wanted someone to help them learn English long distance over Skype so that they themselves could better reach out to the international community. At first, I tried to find an organization that could provide them with that type of long distance support. And when I realized that none existed, I founded the Alliance in 2005 with the mission of supporting women leaders through long distance mentoring and tutoring. The Alliance initially worked in Mongolia, Kazakhstan, and Pakistan, and in 2007, I had the opportunity to travel to Afghanistan, where I saw firsthand the immense need for supporting women's rights. Women's rights had been completely denied from 95, 96 through 2001, and even in 2007, were still largely being denied. But I also met inspiring and dedicated Afghan women and girls who were working so hard to move women's rights forward. Based on that experience, from 2007 on, the Alliance decided to focus the majority of its efforts on Afghanistan. For the next 15 years, we ran 2 primary programs, a mentor program and an English program. The mentor program, until this last August, focused on providing one-on-one long-distance mentoring to Afghan women leaders, primarily legal professionals, Afghan women judges, attorneys, law professors, politicians, women's rights advocates, and some other professors as well. Through long-distance mentoring, the women were provided with an individualized, dedicated mentor in the US or other Western countries for once-a-week mentoring sessions in whatever topic was most relevant to each woman. Sometimes that would mean focusing on helping improve their legal analysis or writing skills. Other times they would talk about concepts in the Afghan Constitution at the time that were similar to the American Constitution or other constitutions, Sometimes it involved discussing the treaties that the women would work with in their jobs. Other times it meant helping them apply for and obtain advanced degrees in their areas. But through these mentoring sessions, the women were able to make great strides forward in their own career. But more importantly, they were able to directly impact women's rights in Afghanistan. The second program is the English program, and it focuses on younger women, primarily university and high school students. Similar to the mentor program, each young woman is provided with her own individual mentor, in this case, professional English teachers, who meet with them twice a week for individualized language tutoring as well as general mentoring. Before this last August, these enhanced English skills allowed the young women to get into universities which required English language skills. It also allowed the women to obtain lucrative employment positions with international NGOs, and it allowed them to apply for scholarships to study abroad. Importantly, it also just allowed them to reach out to the international community for information and ideas, and to share their stories with the world. Sadly, as we all know, last August, for all Afghans, but especially for Afghan women and girls, their lives collapsed when the Afghan government fell. Overnight, all the hard-earned work and advances that women had made in advancing women's rights since 2001 were completely erased. Afghanistan went from a very slow but steadily moving acceptance of women's rights to a violent and repressive gender apartheid. With very few exceptions, women today are not allowed to work. Women can't travel without a male escort. They can't be out in public unless they're covered from head to toe, their faces covered in a burqa. Girls can't go to school beyond the 6th grade, and women are denied all participation in public life. Many of the mentees in our program were immediately forced into hiding, with their lives directly at risk because of their work in advancing women's rights. So it's just truly impossible to overstate how dire the situation is for women and girls right now in Afghanistan. Despite this crisis, our work continues. To our immense relief, 40 of the most at-risk mentees in our mentor program were able to find paths out of the country, in large part due to our collaboration with other larger organizations, particularly the International Bar Association and a group called Vital Voices. These women have been able to now arrive in other countries where the mentor program is working extremely hard to support them as they rebuild their careers around the world. We've been very grateful to universities who've helped with this, including Oxford, Georgetown, Duke, Arizona State University, University of Colorado at Denver. And we're also still working hard as an organization to find a safe path forward to continue serving the women and girls who remain in Afghanistan. That's very brief, but that, in a nutshell, is the Alliance, and that's what we do. But back to the original question, how did my time at Notre Dame lead me to founding the Alliance? As I was thinking about it, I realized there were 3 themes that were really a large part of my time at Notre Dame. One was the importance of service to others. The second was the concept of how interconnected our globe is. And the third, more generally, was the importance of community. As we all know, at Notre Dame, the sense of service to others pervades all aspects of our time here. That's embodied by Father Ted and his life of service to Notre Dame and to the civil rights movement. And I remember in particular one service project I participated in my junior year at Notre Dame called An Urban Plunge, where I was able to live and work with a nonprofit organization that served the homeless community in Tacoma, Washington. And I remember as I watched these workers on the front line serving that community and thinking how important and necessary that work was to that community, and really having this overwhelming sense of what the world really needs from each of us is service. And so that sense of wanting to continue to serve others was, of course, a direct part of founding the Alliance. In addition to service, I think Notre Dame really instilled in me the sense of how interconnected our globe is. For how Notre Dame is tucked away here in South Bend, Indiana, it's always made itself part of the broader international community. I experienced this my sophomore year when I studied abroad in Angers, France, and also through my major. Like Amy before me, I was a government international studies major, and I had excellent professors who taught classes on how interconnected our countries are. And of course, Notre Dame's always welcomed international students to its campus. So that sense of how interconnected our globe is, again, it was a core part of the Alliance, which connects women across the globe to advance women's rights. And finally, as we all know, Notre Dame has an intensely strong sense of community. And that sense of community is the backbone of the Alliance. The Alliance is not me, it's a team or a community. I work with 5 amazing women who help run the Alliance. Gail Zilber, who's our mentor program director extraordinaire, she moves mountains to help the mentees in our programs, especially this year with the crisis. Nancy Arnold Hunting, who's our mentor program coordinator, who coordinates the program with unceasing skill and patience and good cheer. There's Laura Waters, who's one of our longest serving volunteers and who helps run the English program along with the lovely Ann D'Amica. And Scarlett Chigdy, who's our technology guru and also one of our longest serving volunteers. So that small but mighty team of 5 helped me build a larger community of hundreds of volunteers and participants. And we wouldn't be the Alliance without that community. One final point, I was asked, what advice would I give to future students at Notre Dame? And I think my advice is this. I would say that as they too seek to find their path to providing a service to the world, don't be afraid to start small or to do something that feels very simple. The Alliance is based on the simplest of concepts. We match women across the globe to move women's rights forward one woman at a time. It's also based on the simplest of means. We're a volunteer-run organization, and we work through the existing infrastructure of local women's rights groups. But don't let that simplicity fool you. We have accomplished so much. We've helped hundreds of women and girls further their careers and educational development, and by doing that, they've directly impacted women's rights in their communities. We've also accomplished a lot that's less tangible, but no less important. We've helped build bridges of understanding between what are often very different cultures. We've created lifelong friendships across the globe. And we've also provided much-needed moral support to women whose lives were continuously and directly at risk, letting them know that the world, the international community knew about them and cared about them. So I guess I would say, don't be afraid to start small and simple, because small and simple can have great impacts. Thank you.